Our next and final speaker, last but definitely not least, is going to talk about how to finance your business. We've been talking about different women who've made it. We've talked about how to decrease unemployment, but how do you finance an idea? She's the managing partner and co-founder of Small Business Community Capital, SBCC, a private equity and private debt impact fund that invests in small businesses with an emphasis on women and minority founders, as well as investments in low and moderate income communities. I don't remember who said it, but you lift a woman and you lift the entire community. And I know that with Israel and Israel's help in the developing world, they focus on women, and that is probably the best investment that you can make. So without further ado, I would like to invite Monika Mantilla to share her personal story.
Appreciate it. Well, good evening. What an inspiring night. Every one of the stories I've heard, and of course my friend Marlene, and I'm here because of her. She's always inspired me, and the numbers you show are truly amazing. And more New Yorkers need to know about it, because I'm sitting here and thinking, how come I don't know this? And the reality is that is a story that needs to be told, especially now Ruben running for mayor. Yeah. So we need to tell these stories. We need to. We absolutely need to. Galit and Ambassador, thank you for having me here tonight. I know I'm the last speaker, but hopefully it's a theme that interests everyone, right? Raise your hand if you're an entrepreneur or you aspire to be an entrepreneur. Wonderful. Okay, that's wonderful. So I'll tell you a little bit about my work. And I don't work with all entrepreneurs. I work with certain type of entrepreneurs. But I do so because I strongly believe that that box of entrepreneurs is the box with the highest potential of job creation, of wealth creation. So the companies we invest in, and I'm a partner, a managing partner in a fund where we invest in small and lower middle market businesses. The businesses we invest in are typically $1 million EBITDA plus. So, depending on profitability, it's going to be 5, 10, 15 million in revenues. But we're always looking for Latinas, for African Americans, for Asian Americans, for women and men that are diverse, because we strongly believe that they hold an opportunity of value creation that has been largely overlooked and underserved. I'm going to give you a number. I have the honor and pleasure of serving as an advisor to an organization that unites 30 of the largest corporations in America. It's called the $1 Billion Roundtable. And it's called the $1 Billion Roundtable because each corporation that is part of it has committed to buy from diverse firms at least $1 billion a year. And last year, these 30 corporations bought $84 billion from diverse firms. So this is not a small, tiny piece of the economy. It's a significant part of the economy. And every one of you entrepreneurs, I want you to think about your businesses as maximizing value creation. Because in my mind, there's two types of businesses. There are businesses that are lifestyle, that are hobby. You like to do something, it's fun, you earn some money, it's good, but you're not there for scaling, right? For acquiring more businesses, and I'm really interested in those women and in those businesses that want to scale. When we invest, our bet is that that company is going to grow 3-fold, 5-fold, and is going to be able to become a significant supplier to a corporation. And so we're always going under that triad theory where we're finding great companies and we can capitalize them, and corporations are going to buy their goods or services. And everybody wins. You would be amazed to see how corporations are very interested in these types of growth. They need to turn a $20 million company into an $100 million company. They need to turn a company that is going in 2 regions, selling in 2 regions, that goes nationally or goes global. And so the opportunities are there, but I always say I'm a chef in a kitchen and I cook with 4 ingredients. And it really, everywhere I go, whether it's in $1 million business or $1 billion business, there's always 4 key ingredients. And I'm always looking for those 4 key ingredients, and I'll tell you what they are. First, people. People with principles, values, that you can build trust with, that know and have expertise and have vision and have the ability to take a company from where it's now to where, to go places. So people are always the fundamental ingredient for looking for an investment. The second element is the entity. What is that entity that we're buying? We wanted to have barriers to entry. We wanted to have solid margins. We wanted to have a growth potential. So that vehicle alongside the company is what we're saying, this is a bet we want to make. Here's a company that we want to put $10 million into because we know that they can double and triple that opportunity that is in front of them. Then the third ingredient is access to markets. If you have a great team, you have a great company, but you can't sell your product or business, it's kind of useless, right? So that access to market, I have created, a lot of the work I do is not only raising capital to be able to provide it to companies, but also developing relationships with corporate America. And I invite them to think about these opportunities with a model we've created that we describe as the SCD model. So we tell them, think about scaling a company. Think about converting a non-diverse company into a diverse entity. The world is full of middle market companies that are available for acquisition. And it's very important that companies that are growing, and small businesses tend to think, but how can I acquire? Who's going to give me money? There are funds like us who can provide the capital for companies to grow. And then the D of this SCD model stands for divestitures. Corporate America is every day shedding assets because they're not strategic anymore, because they've shifted their strategy, and those are amazing opportunities where a small or a mid-sized businesses can take advantage of that and significantly grow their businesses. When it comes to entrepreneurs, and I know and I understand that frequently capital is this element that people say, I know how to be an engineer, or I know how to do my product, but this theory of capital, how do I think about capital? So we came up with something that I'd like you to keep and think about building great companies, right? But in our case, in our lens of capital, that G and that R and that E and that A and that T stand for very specific and actually the only ways in which you can deploy capital. So let's go through them quickly. The G stands for growth. So you have something today that you can just maximize its potential, right? You're selling 10,000 units, you can sell 20,000, 30,000. So you're going to need capital, right, to enable that growth. The R stands for refinancing. Sometimes you're growing too fast or the market shifts and you really need to go back and say, you know what, I need to refinance because either I'm going too fast or I've had a hit in the market and I can't really pay what I've committed to. So I have to refinance. And that's another event where you have to go back to the drawing board and say, I have to figure out my capital structure. I need to refinance. Then comes the E for expansion. I've done something really good. I have an interesting business, but maybe I can go into another place where I can have higher margins, where I can have a strategic intent that maybe there are more barriers to entry. And so expansion is a way to utilize what you've already built and then take it to another place to capitalize on what you've built and go into areas that can diversify you or can shift you to areas of higher margin. The A is my favorite letter, because there is no better way to grow a business than through acquisitions. I would invite every one of you to look around and look at your competitors. Who's on your side, who's on top of you, who's below you, and call them and say, well, the day you sell, I'm interested in buying. Because growing through acquisition is really one of the most effective ways to significantly grow a company. And the T is frequently the end of the story, the transition. When an entrepreneur, and it might be first generation, second generation, third generation, but they wanna retire, they wanna sell. They might wanna bring part of their family to the business, but they're saying, how do I do this transition? I wanna have a liquidity event, but I also wanna leave a legacy. Some people wanna leave the businesses to their employees, it might be to their family, whoever it may be. Transition requires capital optimization. So whenever you think about, and frequently entrepreneurs are not only thinking about one track, you might be expanding and acquiring, or in transitioning, but you're also wanting to grow. There might be 2 or 3 tracks of building great companies that you might be thinking about. So I wanted to leave that model in you, because utilizing capital in an optimal way might be even more important that business that you're trying to sell, that product or service that you're trying to sell. So always think about capital as your ally. Think about it as your engine for growth. And you don't want to build capital relationships when you're in difficult times. You want to build capital relationships when you're, at the right pace. So that when, and I'm in the business of building relationships with entrepreneurs. And we are very, proud when we see that an entrepreneur that would typically not work with a private equity fund says, no, we trust you, and we know you can provide us capital to grow, and you can also bring us relationships with corporate America. And our model is one where we're trying to bring both relationships with corporate America to open doors, and at the same time provide capital. The stories of grandmas, to conclude. We are all, I truly believe from the bottom of my heart, and I always say this, my mother is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. And my grandmother is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'll tell you a story. When I was growing up in Colombia, of course, it was, a place where women would listen and men would talk, and we would be at the dinner tables. And the men, my grandparents, my uncles, would speak, and we were also children, right? So children and women would sort of remain quiet, right? And my mother would always say, no, don't do that. Don't, if you have something to say it. Say it respectfully, but say it. And so frequently, when I would open my mouth and say it, one day I told my uncle, he was a neurosurgeon, a big guy, and he said something, and I said, I don't agree. And he was like, what? And he stood up and left the dinner. And this was like an Easter dinner or something, so it was a very dramatic moment. And I was sort of, oh my, I did something very wrong. My uncle is leaving, the dinner is finishing. And my mother that was sitting next to me said, muy bien, mijita, muy bien, muy bien. And so we need to continue to empower our kids. And we need to instill in our daughters and our sons, in our kids, that ability to be who we are and not keep our opinions or our desires or our dreams and not adapt, because we tend to be adapting all the time to what others believe. And I think it's important to drive with our dreams, with our passion, and stand on the way of men and say, I don't agree. And so I have 2 daughters, 21-year-old and a 13-year-old. I try to teach them every day that. And sometimes they don't listen. But at times, after the years, they come back and they tell you a story. And sometimes we think they don't listen, and I think they're always paying attention. And it's a function of saying, and it's a function of being a role model as well. So what a pleasure to be surrounded by all these wonderful women. I want to shout out my friend Rogelio, who's out there, a wonderful lawyer who was with me in Pennsylvania today and brought me and wanted to join us. By the way, he's an expert in economic opportunity zones, which is the $1 trillion opportunity of today, and one that we're seizing as we develop companies. We want them to take this opportunity because there is a tsunami of $1 trillion+ that is going to be going into economic opportunity zones. So what inspiring stories I heard today. It was truly a pleasure to be with all of you tonight. And I look forward to meeting the entrepreneurs and hopefully to financing a number of you. My pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Monika. My takeaway from that is that we are the #1 ingredient, first of all, relationships, but we are more than anything. And if you could tell my mother that we always listen, even when we seem not to, I would appreciate it.